Musou and third-party crossovers are getting more frequent the more time flies by. Many of them have been quite good too, from Zelda Musou to Berserk and the Band of the Hawk. But who would have ever guessed that the Touken Ranbu collectible card game for web browsers would be made into a Warriors title? But it's here as a sort of Musou Light, as many people are calling it. Let's dive right into this adventure filled with sword boys. Here is my review of Touken Ranbu Warriors for the Nintendo Switch. To understand the plot of this game, we must understand Touken Ranbu, which is no small task. It's about time travel, monsters, and sword boys. In the future, there's a sect of revisionalists that want to alter ancient Japanese history for their own benefit. They send the History Retrograde Army into the past, an army full of monsters that they want to use to change key moments of Japanese history. To combat this threat, there are what is called a Touken Danchi, a blade or sword that has been manifested into a spirit that takes the form of a pretty boy man, or as many would call them, a sword boy. These Danchi are commanded by a leader, the player character of the browser game, and sent to the past to combat the HRA and make sure time plays out as it should. Now onto this game. Touken Ranbu Warriors has a collection of these Danchi that are without their master, just wandering the future with no purpose. The government of time greets them and serves as their new master, giving them a mission of restoring the timeline of Japan as the HRA tries to alter the battles involving Japanese leaders like Lords Masamune and Hideyoshi. Now, the plot of this game is interesting, but it has issues. We're not introduced to the myriad of Danchi you play as in the game. Each of them has a distinct character and personality. Hase is too prideful. Kunihiro has a complex of thinking himself a copy or replica of the original him. And they just go with it from the get-go and you're kind of left in the dark. There is an anime series for the franchise you can watch to learn these characters, and that's probably a good idea. While I did enjoy the story of the game, I found a lot more intrigue in learning about the battles and history of Japan than I did all of the characters I was using. When it comes to gameplay, this is a Musou action game with light RPG elements. As you play, you'll navigate 3D areas, fighting off large waves of enemies in hack-and-slash combat. Now to get it out of the way, there is no multiplayer in Touken Ranbu Warriors. No co-op, no versus. Progression in this game is back and forth between missions and your base of operations, or Honmaru. The Honmaru has a lot of facilities for you to use. While doing missions, you can use it to place other playable characters in areas of the base to earn experience and bond with each other. Sortie allows you to tackle the next story mission, while Replay lets you repeat previous story missions. Then we have Upgrade and Shop, which is where you build up your party. As you go through missions, you can earn materials to unlock skill slots for each character, getting you a stat increase, enhancement for physical attacking, or new attacks altogether. The shop is also used for enhancement, letting you buy materials with money or equipment to give a smaller stat boost. Then we have Memoirs or the Gallery, where you can watch CG movies, listen to music, or replay bonding events. We'll get to that a little bit later. When you're out on a mission, you'll be restricted to particular characters depending on what chapter you're on. In Musou fashion, you're placed into a 3D environment and fight a bunch of waves of enemies and officers, but to say it feels just like other Musou wouldn't be quite right. Touken Ranbu feels kind of like a Musou that's trying to do things on a smaller scale. The combat feels right, but the maps are smaller in size, much more linear, and the missions themselves are pretty short. There's also a lot more variety in what missions you do. Every mission isn't gonna be, hey, take over all those bases until the head base is open and go take out the boss. Some missions do have you taking over a couple bases, but most of them don't, and having you do other things, like hunting for hidden areas to fully protect a Japanese leader, or carefully stealthing around patrols not fighting enemies at all. Many people don't like this, but I do feel it is a breath of fresh air in the genre. You have a bunch of different mission types to do, so you're not always doing the same thing. While it might feel a little repetitive over time from the sheer amount of missions that you do, there's at least a bit of variety in mission objective. Though the combat will feel right at home with series fans. You have light and heavy attacks with different combos as you upgrade and learn more special attacks, though you don't actually have to use combos for them. You can just tap the R button and do a quick shortcut into a skill. This isn't unlike the mechanic from the Neptunia Senran crossover game, but is executed more quickly and has a much better flow to it. None of that slow motion when pulling up the shortcut menu. But there are combat mechanics more in tune with this particular game. You go into each mission as a pair of characters, even though you only control one. There are gauges that fill for doing quick team attacks or even a longer team attack when your partner will come out and fight with you for a short time. And of course, the character-specific cinematic attack you can build up and use with the A button. In other words, the Muso attack. All in all, the game feels pretty simple. It makes the combat and missions pretty easy to get into, especially for handheld play, considering the majority of missions will only take you about 5 minutes to do. Now after you go through your mission, you'll gain experience for both the characters involved and the base, letting them level up to increase parameters or expand inventory for the game shop. But it also lets your characters bond with one another, and that brings us to some interesting little slice of life with bonding events. This isn't really a dating sim because the characters are interacting with each other and not you, but they will constantly unlock bonding events where you can see a little slice of life thing where the different sword boys become friendly with each other at home. Depending on who you take on a mission can dictate what bonding events you can unlock and view. It's a neat little feature, and more so if you're into the more romance event side of Touken Ranbu. After all, there's a reason it's so popular with women in Japan. As all of this comes together, the content and length of this game really surprised me. With how short the missions were, I didn't expect to be spending more than maybe 7 or 8 hours across the story mode. But every chapter contains a bunch of missions for you to do, and the overall game will easily take you 20 to 30 hours to get through, even if you avoid side content and only doing sortie from the base. Now on to presentation. The game looks pretty good. There's a bunch of detail on the models in and out of docked mode, and it just looks like an impressive little game for a Switch Muso. Not too different from the cinematic shots we saw in the Switch version of Attack on Titan 2. The performance is also pretty good. It could be from the smaller environments, but it stays at 30 FPS for almost the entire game. You'll occasionally get tiny drops when doing the more cinematic attacks, but it's optimized very well. That's all I have to say about that. So let's go into battery life. The original model gets a range of 3 hours and 5 up to 3 hours and 59. The Nintendo Switch Lite gets a range of 3 hours and 28 up to 4 hours and 32. The Redbox or V2 2019 model gets a range of 4 hours and 11 up to 5 hours and 30. And the OLED model gets a range of 4 hours and 37 up to 6 hours and 12. In conclusion, Touken Ranbu Muso isn't a bad little game. Now on the downside, you need a lot of prior knowledge or you will be clueless and lost throughout the entire plot. And there's still a bit of repetition thrown into just how many missions you have as you trek through the adventure. But if you're into Muso or are just a fan of Touken Ranbu, seeing your favorite sword boys in their first 3D outing isn't bad at all and has way more content than I was expecting. Reviews to go rates Touken Ranbu Warriors for the Nintendo Switch a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.